So let me go ahead and get started by covering the agenda that we have. We always have a packed agenda. So I'm going to cover a couple of housekeeping things and talk briefly about the Credential Engine nonprofit. And then Stuart and Nate, who's on the screen there, will talk about the CTD release that actually Nate pushed out this morning. So recall we had our first release back in November.
All right.
So
good morning, everyone. I'm Nate Argo. I work with Jeannie Kitchen and Stuart, and
so we want to talk about that whole
develop some of the
Nate will get
website stuff
that.
here.
And
what I want to cover today is kind of go over the process we've developed for releasing new updates to CTDL.
Our plans
so you see here, we've got this identification number for the CTDL
from our partners and from our technical
release, and what this is essentially just the date. So it's 2017, February 24th.
And of course,
we'll kind of go over the process.
We're
so there's five sort of components to it
co-design partner implementation roadmap. So we call
the first of which is, of course, the live schema itself. And as Jeannie mentioned, we released this just this morning. So currently everything you see on the page linked here, I don't know if I have like the arrows thing, there we go.
Essentially use the
the page link here is the release for
and then we'll talk about our next step.
So
now the
we went through all the stuff that was been pending and moved it over.
In the Google Drive folder, and so all of the TAC members should have access
of all the
to that
classes,
folder. I'd like Scarlett, if you could copy paste that
properties,
URL
concept schemes, and concepts, basically the whole set of metadata
the chat, that would be great.
That we had in pending.
And if anyone cannot
and we've got a list of
it,
terms here, and what these are the different statuses that we use. And stable is essentially stuff that we've gone through, we've looked at it, we use it.
A PowerPoint.
We say, hey, you guys should use it too. Unstable is stuff that we're looking at, it's in development, it's stuff maybe there's still some issues with, still something we want to go over with a TAC with. Basically, it's out there as an idea, sort of, maybe a proposal, I don't know. But
I already talked about the
topics that is for discussion, for development. It may not be kept.
Just very briefly, I've talked about
deprecated, which is for things where if we come up with a better way to convey certain information, and maybe we don't need a term, or maybe we don't need a class or something anymore.
And
we have to keep it around
so
as not to break systems. So we can't just remove it.
So
but we can deprecate it, and what that essentially means is
the website is we'll probably get it.
It's there, you can use it, but we don't recommend it. And an obsolete would be sort of stuff that's been, I guess, deprecated for a long time, or perhaps so out of phase of how we do things anymore that they're solely to keep from breaking systems.
Members as well,
but we really don't want anyone to use it.
Is there, and thanks to all who took the survey.
And then the next kind of area that we have is the pending spreadsheet.
Looks good. And you could also subscribe and receive updates.
And like I said, everything that was on here previously has been moved over to the current release. So if you were to go to this
programmatic information site,
URL, you would look basically the same as the current release. So what will start appearing here over the next few weeks, whatever, is the set of changes for the next release, which I believe we're targeting somewhere in April.
Head on over to the URL.
So again, this works just like it did before, where all of the stuff that we're looking at will be in this spreadsheet. And
if you have any feedback on the website,
you can go to this page, there'll be a button at the bottom that says Show Pending, and that'll filter out everything down to just
update that I wanted to get on
the new stuff.
And what I'd like to do is turn it over to Nate to talk about the release and the
release cycle.
And
over updates,
Sutton
will
show
a status of pending,
and that's joining the webinar, and he can jump in once he gets in.
So I guess that's about it for pending.
Morning. So go ahead,
like
Nate.
I said, there's not really much to show there currently. Right, right. Mm-hmm. Right. And just as an aside, I see Stuart's joined us. Do you have audio, Stuart? You all set up? Okay. Okay. Was there anything that you wanted to add to either the release or the pending pages here? Okay. So moving on, and this maybe I will need some of Stuart's help with. The next kind of major phase of updating CTDL is the review period, and essentially what this is that about 2 weeks before the official release, we basically kind of have to stop ourselves from making changes to the schema so that we can let everyone else in the TAC take a look at it, make comments on it, and get their feedback on all of the pending changes. And what we'll do is we'll email everyone whenever that's ready to start happening. We'll post an announcement to the group and to our website, and we'll also have our GitHub, which I'll go into in a minute, where every change to the CTDL will have a corresponding GitHub issue, sometimes more than one, but usually one, and we'll have links and things to those. And we do recommend that if you are going to make comments, that you do so in the GitHub issues themselves, because that makes it a lot easier to sort of keep track of things. And in the future, if we ever want to go back and figure out why we made a change or what led to certain decisions, it's a lot easier if all of that is kind of in one place, and it's just easier to reference those things in GitHub than it is in Google Groups. So we do recommend using GitHub.
Other than
and so we have kind of just a couple of slides here. For anyone who's not familiar with GitHub, it's basically a software development platform.
In the chat, and it's kind of hidden because we don't want it mistaken for terms. But you can go look at it, and right now you wouldn't see anything pending unless Nate didn't have time to change that over this morning ahead of this meeting. But you shouldn't, because all the pending things have been moved to the CTDL. But through the process, as updates are moving forward for the release, we'll continuously update pending. So probably even as soon as next week, we'll have a couple of things in there that we've identified that we want to include as pending.
I do, but I'm listening. You're all doing fine. I have not. No, not here. Not here.
Right, right. So basically, once something is in the schema, it's there forever. We may set it to a status of deprecated, but it's still going to be there. So like Stuart said, we definitely want the feedback before we release as opposed to afterwards. So anyway, so GitHub, like I said, is just it's a software development platform. It's got a lot of great features for that, but what we're primarily using it for is, again, to keep track of issues and things with the schema. And so we've got just a quick little aside here on how to get set up with GitHub if you aren't already, if you're not familiar. It works like essentially a lot of modern websites. You create an account, you verify it with your email, all that good stuff. And I believe somewhere in here we've got a link to the actual issues.
That comment period is very, very important.
Section, there it is.
The TAC is always welcome to make suggestions.
So this is where you would go after you're all set up, and this is where we've been keeping track of the CTDL issues.
We've got bad grammatical construction and definitions.
So anyway, the next area here is the release itself, which is today. And so we identified all of our changes that are going from pending to the release.
Many of those work their way into these pending issues. But when we come up to this point before we actually come out with a release, that 2-week period is very important for your engagement. To walk through the proposed, what are at that point still proposed. They aren't chiseled in stone. They won't be chiseled in stone until we throw the switch on the release. So if we have done something egregiously awful, or something that you see is going to break systems by making that change or making that addition, this is the time to speak up, because we would rather even hold the actual release than to miss something. So this is a really critical TAC period, where we would, we appreciate and need your guidance. Anyway, thanks, Nate. You can go on.
It looks like right. So I believe we've got, let's see, 1 or 2 partners that are in the midst of developing something. We've got our Work It prototype app that we're currently updating to match the schema. I don't know offhand of other systems that are using it right now.
I just wanted to make a comment
if anyone in the TAC is
about the GitHub.
Is working on something that'd be
GitHub, obviously, to record all of the stuff that we're getting ready to do. And of course, you're welcome also to post a GitHub issue if you see one that needs to be raised. There's a lot of currently a lot of traffic on the GitHub, so you may want after you've got a GitHub account, you may not want to follow because you might be inundated with emails. But what we will do is we will bring back to the Google group and post when we think you need to look at, we want you to look at something specific, which could take you into the specific place where you, then if you have an account, you can do comments and stuff. But that was just a warning that if you follow, you could, you could end up like with traffic like schema.org. If you guys are, any of you are following it, you could end up with 20 messages a day, and that's probably something you don't want. But nevertheless, being able to get at it for us is really important.
And Nate and Stuart, Nate Otto put a question in the chat what's the potential for breaking systems that use a schema? What applications are in production? Maybe Stuart can talk a little bit about how these releases are formatted, so with the goal that systems will not break as updates are made.
Right. And even if we didn't know of any systems that were currently in development that might be broken by changes, it's a good habit, a good discipline, I guess, to have to avoid making those kinds of changes.
So,
anyway,
and
where was I?
we do know
so the
people. I probably shouldn't.
Release is going out today.
To say who, but we get back channel questions around how do you do this and can you add that. In fact, when we look at the at this release, there are 3 properties that were added because someone needed them, and so or a legitimate reason. And then we looked at the reasons and so people are using it, and those are the people that also, in addition to our systems, the ones that are being developed within the credential engine itself, the registry and so forth. We clearly don't want to break our own systems, but we don't want to break anybody else's either. So we want to be very careful with changes so that we don't make changes that break systems. So we're backward compatible. Thanks.
Oh, thanks.
Well, it's kind of another comment. Can I just add one more comment to that? So, and just as a reminder, everyone, we said at the very beginning that we're building off of.
All right. So what I'll show you here in a moment is the release page itself, and again, it's basically just a set of what was changed and links to GitHub issues that explain that in more detail.
So one of the things I think that
the idea being
and Nate
that
will do some screen shares
it works as sort of a summary,
kind
of like patch notes to software.
To point out that there's not,
and the other thing
that
is currently in development, it's not there yet, but will be soon, is in the metadata viewers that we've shown before, we're going to add links to those that will allow you to access the history for a given term or class or property, whatever, in both the human readable thing, which will basically just link to the release page for that item, as well as a serialized version that will be sort of a machine readable version of that history. And again, that's not there yet, but that's something else that we're developing. But before we get to that, this is the structure of the history that we've been working with here. And Stuart, did you want to jump in on this one? This is your diagram.
Well, basically, what we're doing is, and probably looking at the diagram is probably the best way to look at it. On the far right, left of the diagram, you have the CTDL term, a property, or a class that exists in the schema. And from the schema, there will be, I don't know exactly what the label in the tables would be, but there is a SCOS change note link property that points to a cumulative history of changes on that term. And then each change has a change set that says what was removed, what was added. So with the removal and add functions, you can determine the delta between what this triple or this statement, what it was and what it has become. So over time, accumulated in that term history will be a series of change sets. Each change set has to do with the removal and addition changes to a specific property, a triple in RDF terms, so that over time you can actually look at those changes, determine the delta at any given point. And those will, as Nate says, would be accessible directly through the schema, because the property definition or the class definition would link to its own change history table, and that history table aggregate all of those changes over time. So it's a statement.
All right. Yeah. So like
records
said,
of changes.
Get each term has one term history with many change sets, and the statements within those change sets are at a very granular level. So if we update a definition or something, let's say, we would have a removal of the old definition and the addition of the new one. So that's kind of the level that operates at. And correct me if I'm wrong, Stuart, but I believe if we add a property that comes across as just a series of additions, one for each sort of, I guess, property of the property, we would have an addition for the label, addition for the definition, and so on, right? Okay.
Yes. Correct.
All right, so I think that's about it for that slide. And so this is a quick preview of what the release page looks like. And now currently we don't have every bit of data in there. We're still kind of developing some of the back-end systems for this, but it'll all end up looking like this. So you've got, I don't know if this slide's big enough here, but you've got the name of the release, a quick description of it, and then for each one of these terms here, and again, these are links to the metadata viewer for those terms. You've got a list of changes that have been made for that, and these changes are aggregate across the entire release. So if we make one change to a term and then later on we come back and make another one, all of those get compiled together and shown here as one group. So there's only one entry per term. And so you see here where we've added ceterms degree minor, we've got a whole bunch of additions for the different aspects of that term. And then the last thing we want to go over for this section is the guide. And what this is basically, it's meant for developers, for people who are interested in knowing more about the schema and how to use it. Stuart, if you want to jump in on this one, because Stuart actually wrote the vast majority, I think pretty much all of this guide.
Well, the guide, we actually went over the guide.
This is for people.
Yeah, we went over the guide at our I think on our last TAC call, and it's our first attempt to wrap some narrative around the properties and classes and how to use them, along with graphics and so forth. And it is a work in process. There are parts of it near the bottom, and there's a table of contents near the bottom that are not complete yet, that we are working on. We are working on, starting to work on now, the guide entries for handling competencies and competency frameworks. The basic CTDL properties and classes have all been documented. But again, it's a work in process. We're adding when people ask us a question and we go, well, that question should have been answered in the guide, and if we tried it in the guide and it didn't obviously didn't work. So it will develop over time. But I don't know how deeply you want me to go into this, Nate. But each it's annotated with graphs for different classes and the use of properties within those classes, and plus there's serializations of each of the graphs. So we've tried to be as complete as possible with it. But any advice, and by the way, if any of you read any of it and think some things could be said better, your comments are welcome, please.
Yes. Thanks. Why don't you go ahead, Nate, and I'm going to move this out of the way here, and you can go ahead and pull over the screen share.
Let me get that going here.
For your screen share, you can cover us up, and then we'll come, just go ahead and pull it on up so everybody can see really well, and then once we get back to the PowerPoint, we'll show the cameras again. Can you pull that over?
Okay. Oh, is it not? Oh, it didn't get resized. Okay, there we go.
Still not. There we go. I got it.
Okay. All right, so like I was showing a minute ago, we have the release page itself. And so, again, we've got the name of the release and the date of the release here, quick description of it. Then we have a series of terms that were updated for that release. And within each one, we have the list of changes. So here for this one, we updated the definition, which I believe is the RDFS comment, right, Stuart? We changed the definition, but the way that this is accounted for here is that we removed the original and then we added a new one. And then we've got just kind of a summary of the reasoning behind it, and we'll probably update the reasoning to be a little bit more verbose. But then we've got the link to the GitHub issue for that particular change. If you wanted more information about it, you would go and take a look at that. And it's the same pattern for each one of these. And again, we've got several entered here. We're going to be entering the rest of them over the course of the day, so they're not all here yet, but they will be soon. That's about it for the release page. And
Nate, could you stay there for just 1 second?
Yeah.
It also contains not only changes, some minor changes to existing terms, but it also includes some new terms. So, for example, degree minor, and below it is degree major, and degree concentration are new properties.
Right.
But if we can go back up to the top, Nate, I want to talk for just a moment about what I mean by not breaking systems. If we take a look at this first, here we've got the first term there, verification service provided. And what we've done there is changed some text in the comment to that property. That we didn't touch the definition, which is normative. And all we've done with the changes to the comment was just improve the clarity or something so that it made more sense. We didn't anywhere change the meaning. And so when we talk about breaking a system, if in fact we had somehow changed the verification service profile definition in such a way that it no longer was applicable to someone who has used this in the system, and it's no longer the same, then what we would do with verification service profile is we would declare a new term and deprecate the verification service profile with a pointer to the new term that we are using, so that someone who has used verification service profile in their data, it will still remain viable. It'll still it will still exist in the system, and you can yeah. Anyway, it still exists. So we don't. That's what we mean by not breaking systems. So we will make changes that don't break systems. When we want to make a change to a term that actually will break systems, we will declare a new term, and so that we never ever delete a term.
Right. Right, which is why it's very important to get feedback before things are added.
Yeah.
I do see we have a question in the chat from Jim here. Let's see. As the registry is implemented, is there any indication of what are the most important and most used objects and properties? Do you mean like,
Nate,
what do you call it?
Yeah. I can talk about that a little bit. Definitely. Okay. So, of course, right now we're still working with our partners, but I think we have 88 or 89 partners now. Each have selected at least one credential. Many have selected a few or several, and they're across all types of credentials, certificates, certifications, badges, all the types of degrees, license, so forth. And yeah, there's definitely a pattern. There's definitely a pattern of the most used properties and entities or classes for those. And so actually we've just restructured what we call our editor. And you might recall in prior presentations we've included a little picture that we call how it works now, and we have this really manual process of researching, looking at, and then basically transforming website content into the CTDL. So we definitely see a pattern, and I'm thinking that one of the things that we'll be able to do in the very near future, maybe by the next TAC even, is show that, be able to make that visible, through graphing, just so everyone can see where things are being used and what the patterns are. And in particular, for credentialing organizations, we can kind of bucket them into two kind of top-level questions. Is this credential primarily earned through a learning opportunity, or is this credential primarily earned through an assessment? Where obviously learning opportunities include assessments, but it means something very different when you're talking about certificates, certifications, and licenses versus, say, degrees or high school programs. So I think that's something that would be of great interest to everyone, so I'd like to be able to expose that, and we can do that using our initial partner data, and I think it will be very meaningful. So I hope that helped, Jim. Let me know if you'd like more information.
If I could jump in as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Jim, I think that what your question is targeting is, in a sense, what's the least viable set of properties to describe various entities within the CTDL model. And what I think what Christine is describing is a mechanism where we are still in the process of shaping that, and now that we've got many more we've got partners with actual data, those patterns are beginning to emerge. I'm hoping that out of those patterns we will be able to say, this is the, I don't want to attach a term to it, but here's the least viable, record structure, or least valuable amount of data that we would need, at least in the credential engine registry. That's what we're seeing there as that set. That said, of course, and I always have to remember that the CTDL itself is just a big dictionary. It's a big dictionary from which these systems are built. And your question, Jim, is that natural push toward, okay, but it's big. CTDL is big. And we no credential is ever going to have everything, every one of those properties that is here in the dictionary. So what terms from the dictionary form useful records, and what is so finding out what would be the least that could be there and have a useful record is emerging. So we don't have a solid answer to that yet.
No, but I think we could definitely begin getting some good data from our partners, and also once Nate needs to show some more with the release, but That is a kind of a segue to our next topic, actually. So.
Right. So the next thing that I was going to show is the pending page, and we can kind of compare it to the release page here. So you see that on the release page we have the new release, and on the pending page, if you were to compare the terms and things on these, they would look the same because, again, we've just released this. Had you looked at this page yesterday, you would have seen a variety of items on here that were marked as status of pending. So unfortunately, I don't have really anything in particular to show in that respect. But what I can show you is that we've got some of the terms that we've deprecated since the first release. Within each section, the deprecated terms will be grouped together at the bottom. They'll show as kind of grayed out. You can still access all the information in them, but we wanted a strong visual indicator that this term is not recommended to be used. So again, you can still get to the data, but we've deprecated the term. So these are all grouped at the bottom of each section. And then the newer stuff that was added would have the same status of stable as anything else in the schema. So you can't really pick it out from here. Was there anything else on these pages we wanted to cover in particular, Jeannie?
Pending, again, it's kind of hidden, but you can get to it from, you go to the TAC page, and then you'll see pending on the menu. Yeah. And then just in the very bottom of it, you see there's a search box, and you jump to show stable, show unstable, and show pending. And you just click show pending, and as Nate noted, there's nothing in pending today. There will be next week because we already have a couple of items that we know we want to start populating. So what we do is we ongoing populate the pending so we don't have a huge backlog of work for us at the end of every month. So pending is a great way to see what's going on. There's always that corresponding GitHub issue, and we could let everyone know next week when we have something in there, just so you could look at it and see that you can click show pending. Then you have to scroll down the page, and it will show only things that have a status that you see in the row there of pending, and you'll be able to see all the details about that item.
Carla has
right, and we yeah, I was about to go over that. Yeah, so for the deprecated terms, if it's a term that has been superseded by something else where we've essentially replaced the term, not all of them are like that, but in cases where that is the case, we have a row in the table called superseded by, and that will link to the term that you should use instead of the term that was deprecated. So you can see that here. So we deprecated learning resource and replaced it with target learning resource. Does that answer your question?
Hey, it's Carla. Yeah, that is useful. I'm curious if maybe superseded by should just always be there so that people could automatically know whether or not it is superseded, and if it's just not applicable, it's not applicable. But that way you'd know that it hasn't been left off.
In other words, just keeping a blank row for a non-superseded.
We could do that.
I think that would be useful because we have deliberately not put in rows that didn't have values.
Right.
Is that a bad judgment?
That's a good question for the TAC. Anyone has any off the top of their head opinions?
Well, I'm thinking that for Carla, it probably wasn't the best judgment that we probably should include.
Well, I completely understand. You don't want to have a billion lists of everything. So I can, but I think for the superseded by, for anything that's been deprecated, that one seems to make sense to me because it will automatically show someone where else to go.
Right. Yes, I agree. So we could be selective. We can still be selective then. So if something doesn't have a subproperty or isn't a subproperty of something or a subclass, we can leave those rows off, but this one is critical or more important.
Okay. Let me make a quick note of that. Okay. So anyway, the last thing here that we have to share is the guide itself. And so this is a great reference for developers or for anyone who's curious about how to use CTDL. It's not intended to be read, end to end. It's meant to be, like I said, a reference essentially. So you've got your ever-present table of contents over here on the left, and kind of as you go through and explore it, you'll see the different things within that. So here you can see we've got a diagram. We can zoom in on here, and then as Stuart I think mentioned earlier, we've got serializations of that diagram right below it, and these are I think always in Turtle and JSON LD, and what you can do is compare them, if you wanted to see different representations of that, and then you've got of course some text to kind of explain more about that. Stuart, did you want to add anything to this while I'm on this page, or?
No.
Because I know we went over this, I think, in the previous meeting.
I think the important thing is to get the architecture of the page and how the figures work. That there's a figure, there's serialization, there's a narrative describing what's going on in the figure, there's the figure, and then there are the, and if you click on the figure, they can be enlarged. But you also get the serialization. If we get that and then understand the basic structure of the table of contents, the primary classes, those classes that support the primary classes, and then utility classes like data structures, postal address, contact point, things of that sort. I think this is going to be a very valuable addition and a place where someone wanting to make sense of the specification, that mile-long set of tables defining properties and classes, can get a fairer sense and actually see that in most cases the CTDL description is not overwhelming. So I think going forward that this guide, which I'm kind of thinking maybe should be renamed an implementer's guide, maybe, I think should be the first place people go when they want to know what's going, when they want to begin to get a handle around the CTDL. Because there are all sorts of things. I know Jim here on the call, they're looking at CTDL and doing some stuff and had some questions, which I haven't responded to your email. Sorry, Jim, yet. But some of those are answered here by going either to many of them in the support classes, the utility classes. So this is we hope going forward will become really the kind of a landing place for someone who's wanting to technically implement. And as you notice down at the bottom, 7, 8, there's some to-dos that we haven't done, just haven't gotten done yet. We're in the process of doing number 6, which is documenting out, fleshing out the concept schemes. I'm sorry, yeah, not the competencies. I meant number 7. Number 7, competencies and competency frameworks. So yeah, so I think it's hopefully it's useful. Again, let us know where it's not. Let us know where it's ambiguous. Let us know where you say, if you look at this and go, but I still have a question about how to do X. Let us know, because we'll continue to flesh this out so that we can include X, how to, how we see modeling X.
Right, and if we don't have a way of doing X, then maybe we need to develop one. I mean, a lot of our terms came out of questions of how do I do, this, that, or the other. So, you can contribute that way just by asking the question.
Sure.
So I believe that was.
Here, I will name.
Yeah.
Just one last thing. An example of how something came out of somebody. The additions in the new release of degree concentration, degree major, degree minor, came from comments from Eric Korb, who's in the group here, that he couldn't do something. That he couldn't do. He was doing some verified claims, and he couldn't do something. And so, so that's where it came from feedback. feedback.
Yeah.
So just spend a little bit of time. I mean, granted, it's not something you want to curl up in bed to read this guide, but you know, it would be good to have your comments and thoughts on it.
Right. So I think that was all I had as far as stuff to share. If we wanted to move on to Credential Person.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and move that out of the way, Nate, and I'll pull the PowerPoint out?
Yeah.
Click hide on it.
Yep.
Got it. Got it.
Resize there. Okay.
Okay. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. And the question that came up earlier was a good question about what are we seeing with the patterns of most needed, you know, aspects of the schema, and that brings us to the next section where we have one in particular, and we want to get your feedback on ceterms Credential Person. This is something we included early on based on feedback from the Technical Advisory Committee. We have not utilized it at all yet. It is marked as unstable in the CTDL. But what we want to do is get your feedback on whether or not it needs to minimally go from unstable to stable and be looked at for refinement later. So the Credential Person, let's see.
Jean, if I could add one little note there. If I could add one note, or whether it should be deprecated.
Right.
That was the other option. So we're basically at a point where we are looking at Credential Person and going, you know, we're not seeing it in our data, but our data may be reflective of, you know, of partners. Maybe we're missing something. But this came out of the Credential Person, in addition to credentialing organization and quality assurance organization, was added because the TAC was brought up early on by the TAC. And now we're at the point where we need to think about what to do, whether it's within scope, whether it has, what it's for. So as the people who asked us, or, you know, suggested it, we're back to you for comment.
Yeah, so we set up a survey that we're going to ask all of you to take for us, and all of our partners, we'll ask them to take that survey as well. The Credential Person, as Stuart was saying, is on par with a credential organization. So essentially the way it was originally set up, and it hasn't been updated since the original release to correspond exactly with all of the organization properties and range. But the idea is that a Credential Person could essentially do many of the things that an organization does in terms of relationships to credentials and quality assurance. And so we set up a very, very, very short survey. You literally see the whole thing on your screen here. And we're asking in the aspect of some of the applicable use cases. And please know, we're not saying that we don't think it should be included. We're not saying that at all. We just don't want to move it to stable, you know, if people don't believe we should be doing that. So we really need feedback to make any kind of decision to move forward. So some of the scenarios that we'll ask about are, you know, whether or not quality assurance for a credential could be issued by a person rather than an organization, or credentials could be created by a person rather than an organization. Credentials could be issued by a person rather than an organization. Or another example, learning opportunities for the purpose of earning a credential could be offered by a person rather than an organization. And the same with assessments. That assessments for the purpose of earning a credential could be offered. And you may have other examples of use cases. We could have had a longer list, but we felt like these were kind of in the top range for that. So if a follow-on to this webinar, if you could please go out and answer that survey, and Scarlett could even copy-paste that URL in the chat. And of course, we always send our follow-up email, so we'll include it. And let us know what you think. If the vast, the input shows that we need to retain credential person, then what we would do is begin a process to move it from unstable, which is currently exists and is considered to be unstable. And the antithesis of that, as Stuart was saying, would be that we would deprecate it. So we don't want to deprecate it, unless it's absolutely necessary. So anything else to add on the credential person, Stuart or Nate, or any other feedback happening in the chat that I need to address?
I'm responding to a few now. I just responded to Jeff asking for a little more information. Jim, you asked whether is the credential person issuing assertion of a person assertion of a person earning seems to be out of scope. You're absolutely correct. Regardless of what this survey is even trying to find out, these are people who play some role in awarding, prepping people for, they play a role in relationship to the credential. They are not the person's earning a credential. That is out of scope, has been from the beginning. So this is just, for example, let me throw out an example. Someone is certified as a Microsoft, or is a Microsoft certified trainer.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, now they may work for somebody else, which might be an organization, but alone as a certified Microsoft trainer. So we're that's what we're running to find out. Anyway, the survey pretty well covers the scoping. And that Jean did the survey, and the questions in the survey pretty well.
I didn't include the top of the survey. The top of the survey just kind of has the intro that, keeping in mind that it's out of scope for the CTDL to describe the credential issued to the person, except in aggregate. So we don't have any personally identifiable information. We're talking about the person as on par with a credentialing organization, not the receiver of a credential. So I will go ahead and move on from that. And again, we're not saying that we disagree at all. We're just saying we want feedback, because it was just something that we haven't, with all the other reviews going on, it just hasn't been looked at. And so now is the time. Take a look at it. Now, along with that one, you'll recall from the last meeting, we talked about a couple other review groups, and Scarlett had set up some doodle polls to put dates out. And frankly, we ran behind on those dates, but we do have the plan is to initiate those groups in March. So the priorities are the credentialing or cost manifest and condition manifest, and I think this kind of goes back to an earlier question as well, as the patterns that we're seeing. And the cost manifest and condition manifest, we feel strongly that definitely needs to be further explored, that there will be changes. The other one was credential holders, and that would be aggregate information about credentials issued to people as well, and a couple others that we have in the queue. All that information is in the Google folder. I went ahead and just copied the one-pager over from the last meeting and put it in the folder. And again, we'll follow up with everyone and make sure that we get some people participating with a couple of those review groups. The next section, we want to talk about this work that we're doing with the credentialing organizations that have partnered with us and selected credentials to include with the pilot. And we call it co-designing partner roadmaps for implementation. And the implementation specifically would be the partners implementing CTDL to either push or pull the metadata, the data to the registry. So we just kicked that off actually yesterday. We had our first meeting with 9 partners. We are hoping to get a 10th, but they just hadn't confirmed yet, that will work with very closely to develop this guidance and to help them implement so we can kind of test the guidance as well. And then that guidance will be made available to all partners as well, so it's not as though we're just limiting it to those 9 or 10. Those 9 or 10 simply volunteer to spend more time with us on that subject to help us with the design. And as we talked about during the last webinar, the goal is to get down to the very bottom of this, chart or this picture that we've shown you a couple of times to get to the step of getting the data to the registry, but doing it in a way where we're not asking these partners to change anything on their back end information. So that's where we just started working with them, and we're going to, we did a survey. They've all responded to the survey. We asked all partners to complete a survey to give us more information about how they store their data, what it looks like, things that we can't see, because as I had already described with our editor, we're already looking at all of this data. We already have a very good sense of it, but we can only see what we can see from websites or from what's lacking on a website, and we have to ask the partners to provide the information because it's not available. So we're working with them on this step here, and went over in the webinar yesterday how we're going to go about the step of analysis and mapping to the CTDL. So we're asking during this phase 1, for an inventorying of data describing the credentials and their related entity types. And in this process, we're going to look at how we can utilize the editor that we've developed that basically atomizes and does this inventorying for them to see how we can help make it easier for the partners to do. And then the phase 2 will be the crosswalking the inventory of the data to the CTDL entity types and to their properties. So we want the partners to have a really good idea of what that analysis process looks like. And we're looking at the related entity types in particular. This diagram here gives a good sense of the entities that are relevant, most relevant for this exercise coming through here, going from the agent or credentialing organization in this case, of course the credential, condition profile, assessment profile, learning opportunity profile, and competency frameworks as well. So again, what we want to look at is public information. We don't want people to think that we're asking for kind of behind the scenes proprietary or personally identifiable information. Largely the information is on websites, although there are gaps in the usefulness of that because of the way it's set up and because of sometimes a lack of information, or maybe because of utilizing, say, PDFs in lieu of readable data. And looking for additional available data describing credential attributes that we're not currently making publicly available that might be useful. So in all the work that we've done looking at the partner information, again, we can kind of see where those gaps are. They become more and more visible in the patterns of what is publicly available. We're beginning also by looking at whether or not the partner information kind of behind the scenes is unstructured or structured data, and with either one of those scenarios, again, providing solutions or guidance through the partner roadmap guides that any partner will be able to use upon completing this process. And our plan right now is to have completed the process with the partners by end of June with the 9 to 10 partners. And it's not my intention to, there's a few more slides that look a lot like this slide. And this slide was used during the partner webinar to just kind of, simplify or show the relationship where things on the website are how they map to the CTDL. So here in this example for this dental assisting program, how that maps to the CTDL, even down to the unit type and the unit value. So just kind of showing that pictures of what that looks like and how what that means with the CTDL. So there's a couple of slides that show this mapping on a typical website. Again, here we're seeing where we might have some condition profile items or additional conditions that need to be mapped to the CTDL, down to the contact point, and at the same time it will also help the partners see where there may be a gap in the CTDL, so where they might think it is important to include additional properties or concepts and so forth as well. So we went through all of these examples, including cost type information with them. And again, the learning opportunity profiles, conditions, and how that maps to web content. And so, most of you are probably looking at this and thinking, yes, this looks familiar. The different, organizations put the information out, of course, looking a little bit differently, but this is kind of the common information you're going to see with degree or, certificate type programs that require a learning opportunity to complete them. So as we're going through this process with these 9 or 10 partners, we want to keep the TAC informed, and we're going to not with the next TAC, but the following, have it on the agenda for some of the partners who are participating with the process to be on the agenda with the TAC and talk about it, and talk about how we're working together to that, so we can figure out together how to best implement this with our partners. Now, as a part of the exercise, we've set up a private workspace for this group so they can feel free to ask questions. And so we have a Google group for them. We have a Google Drive for them. We have a regular meeting schedule to get together. In between that meeting schedule, we'll provide one-on-one technical assistance as needed as we work together to basically crosswalk the data that the partners have to the CTDL and determine the strategies and what that roadmap could look like for any partner to implement. So let me stop there and see if Stuart might have anything to add to what I just talked about, and were there any questions or comments that came up about?
I have nothing to add, Jane.
Good deal. I see a lot of stuff going on in the chat, so looks like. Okay, so our next steps, let's see where we are with time here, are to get back to the focus on the registry specifications. As all of you know, we've spent a lot of time talking about the CTDL, and we will have continued to talk about it because we have to continue to work on it. It's not a once and done. But we now need to focus more time on the registry specifications, so we'll have more of that time dedicated to that on the agenda, upcoming agenda. We'll be working with our partners again on that co-design of the implementation roadmap. And we have those review groups that we need to get going in March so we can look toward the April release. Now, with the releases, it's not as though we have to have everything done by April. We could definitely have additional releases, but we'd like to be able to work towards some updates being done in April. And the way the release pattern works is 2 weeks prior to the last, basically the last Friday of every month will, or the month, I'm sorry, when we have a release, the comment period will come out, and then the release will be official on the last, the last Friday of the month. So that would make it April 28th. And that is all we had on the agenda today. Is there anything else anybody would like to talk about?
Feel free to unmute your, I don't think people are muted.
No, I don't think so. They shouldn't be muted.
If you just want to bring something up, you can do it vocally.
All right. Well, if nobody else has anything in particular they would like to discuss, thank you everyone again for joining. We so appreciate it. Watch for the follow-up email, and please go ahead and complete that very short survey that we're sending out. Your input is essential, and we look forward to talking to everyone soon. Oh, and I do want to note that Jim Goodell did put a note in the chat about the CEDS review that's coming up, and we can also include that with our follow-up email, Jim, so all of the TAC members, if anyone's interested in that, they'll get that in the follow-up email as well.
And I noticed that there's some fairly significant discussion around the credential person. In addition to the survey, obviously, feel free to throw comments onto the Google group. I mean, we could have a discussion.
Yeah, and if there's not one already, I'll set up a thread for person in the Google group.
That'd be great. Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
Bye, everyone.